The sound of a snapping finger is distinctive. It is a sharp, percussive demand that cuts through the hum of server fans and the low murmur of six-figure deals being negotiated over lukewarm, sparkling water. When it happens within 3 inches of your ear, however, it is not just a sound. It is a declaration of war. Hey, IT girl. Earth to IT girl. I didn't look up immediately. I was currently staring at a complex schematic for a Phase 3 fiber optic route that was supposed to ensure the 37th floor didn't melt down during the upcoming summer heatwave. My finger was tracing the blue line where the redundant cooling loop intersected with the primary server NX. It was a delicate ecosystem of power, glass, and data, one that I had personally designed, negotiated, and leased to this firm 3 years ago. Before we dive deeper into exactly how this disaster unfolded, let me know in the comments, what city or country are you watching this from? I always love seeing how far these stories travel. The finger snapped again, faster this time, like a metronome for an idiot. I know you can hear me, the voice drawled. It's lagging. It was Jared. Of course, it was Jared. Jared was 26 years old, wore a fleece vest that cost more than my first car, and held the job title of Director of Visionary Ops. As far as I could tell, that title meant his father was the vice president of the holding company and needed somewhere to park his son where he couldn't break anything expensive. Unfortunately, Jared was trying very hard to prove that assumption wrong. I finally turned my swivel chair, the leather creaking softly in the silence of the open-plan office. "Can I help you, Jared?" "The Wi-Fi," he said, gesturing wildly at the glass-walled conference room behind him. Inside, 5 other guys in identical Patagonia vests were staring at a frozen Zoom screen with looks of mild panic. "It's lagging. We're pitching the Series B guys in 3 minutes. Fix it." I took a slow, measured breath. I am a 45-year-old woman in a tailored Italian blazer. I do not wear a lanyard. I do not have a walkie-talkie clipped to my belt. I was sitting at the massive mahogany conference table because the natural light was better for reading the fine print on blueprints, not because I was waiting for a help desk ticket. "I'm not IT, Jared," I said, keeping my voice level, the kind of tone you use when explaining physics to a toddler. "I'm reviewing the infrastructure specs for the renewal. If you're having latency issues, you need to submit a ticket to the portal. The support team is on the 4th floor." Jared laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound that grated against the acoustic paneling. "Excuse me? I don't submit tickets. I tell people to do their jobs. You're sitting here with a laptop, aren't you? Fix the router. Reboot the whatever. Just make the internet work." "I am busy," I said, turning back to the schematic and picking up my fountain pen. "And I don't have admin access to your local LAN." That was the wrong thing to say. Or perhaps, considering how the rest of the week went, it was the perfect thing to say. Jared slammed his hand down on the table, rattling my coffee cup and sending a ripple of vibration through the heavy wood. The entire open-plan office went dead silent. The marketing team lowered their phones. The developers stopped typing. The ambient noise of productivity vanished, replaced by the heavy weight of embarrassment. "You know what?" Jared shouted, his face flushing a blotchy, uneven red. "I am sick of the attitude from the support staff in this building. My father pays a fortune for this lease. I can't even get a stable connection, and I have to deal with you." He leaned in closer, invading my personal space. "You're useless. You're actually useless." He pointed a shaking finger at the double glass doors. "Get out. You're fired. I don't want to see you on this floor again. I'll have HR send your final check. Go." I froze. Not out of fear, but out of sheer scientific fascination. I was witnessing a rare natural phenomenon, a man with zero situational awareness digging his own grave with a golden shovel. He was firing me. He actually thought he had the authority to fire me. Speaking of authority and making smart moves, if you're enjoying this disaster unfolding, do me a favor and hit subscribe or drop a like. It helps the algorithm know you enjoy watching entitled executives implode. Thanks. I looked at him. I looked at the silent office watching us, 60 pairs of eyes wide with shock. I looked at the leather folder under my hand, the one containing the lease renewal addendum. That document was the only reason his Visionary Ops Center had power redundancy and high-speed fiber access. "You're firing me?" I asked, just to have it on the record. I wanted to be absolutely clear. I'm firing you, Jared spat, straightening his vest. Get your shit and get out. Now. I stood up. I didn't argue. I didn't explain that I wasn't an employee of Next Gen Synergies, but rather the independent infrastructure overseer for the entire Skyline Tower. I didn't mention that the IT girl he just screamed at held the master encryption key to the building's neural network. I simply closed my laptop with a soft click. I kept my pen. I picked up my leather folio, leaving the unsigned renewal contract sitting in the exact center of the mahogany table. Understood, I said calmly. Good luck with the Series B pitch, Jared. I walked to the elevator. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. I didn't rush. I walked with the stride of someone who owns the ground beneath their feet. I pressed the call button, waited for the soft chime, and stepped inside. As the polished steel doors began to slide shut, I caught one last glimpse of the room. Jared was smugly high-fiving one of his best buddies, thinking he had just asserted dominance. He hadn't asserted dominance. He had just severed the femoral artery keeping his business alive. He just didn't know it yet. The elevator ride down to the lobby was smooth. Skyline Tower prides itself on its elevators. They are high-speed, whisper-quiet, and serviced weekly. I know they're serviced weekly because I sign the vendor invoices. I approve the maintenance schedules. I decide who gets priority access during rush hour. I stepped out into the lobby, the cool air conditioning hitting my face, and nodded to the security chief, grim-faced Larry, who was monitoring the camera bank behind the marble desk. Afternoon, Miss Tess, Larry grunted, his eyes flicking from the monitors to me. Everything good on 37? Not anymore, Larry, I said, offering a tight, thin smile. Not anymore. 10 minutes later, exactly enough time for me to walk to the coffee shop across the street, order a double espresso, and sit by the window. The chaos started upstairs. I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't need to be. I knew the script. I had written the stage directions. Up on the 37th floor, Marcus, the building manager, walked out of the service elevator. Marcus is a good man. He's 60, wears suits that are slightly too large for him, and sweats profusely when things go off script. He was carrying a notary stamp and a bottle of expensive champagne. He was there to celebrate the signing of the 10-year lease extension, a deal I had spent 6 months negotiating with the VP, Jared's father. Marcus walked into the glass-walled conference room, a smile plastered on his face. He saw the folder I had left on the table. He saw Jared and his team, still high on adrenaline and low on intelligence. Afternoon, gentlemen. Marcus boomed, trying to be jovial. Where is she? Where's Our Lady of the Hour? We've got ink to dry. Jared spun around, looking annoyed that his victory lap was being interrupted. Who? Tess, Marcus said, looking around the room, confused. She said she was setting up in here. We need to finalize the infrastructure rider before 5 p.m., or the grandfather clause on your cooling unit expires. Jared scoffed, grabbing a Red Bull from the mini fridge. Oh, her. The brunette with the attitude? Yeah, I fired her. The room stopped. It wasn't a quiet stop. It was the kind of stop where the air gets sucked out of the room. The developers in the back row lowered their headphones. The HR director, a woman named Sarah, who actually knew who I was but had been in the bathroom during the incident, walked in just in time to hear this. Her face went the color of bleached paper. Marcus blinked. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. I'm sorry, Jared. You did what? I fired her, Jared said slower, as if he were talking to a child. She was incompetent. Couldn't fix the Wi-Fi. Gave me lip, so I told her to pack up and get out. You're welcome, by the way. We need better vendors. Marcus stared at him. He stared at the empty chair where I had been sitting. He stared at the unsigned contract on the table. Jared, Marcus said, his voice trembling slightly. Tess isn't a vendor. She's not IT. Whatever she. Tess is the landlord, Marcus whispered, the horror dawning on him. What? Technically, she is the independent infrastructure overseer and leaseholder for the commercial zones, Marcus said, his volume rising as the panic set in. She owns the rights to the fiber trunk you use. She owns the lease on the backup generators. She holds the master agreement for this entire floor. I just manage the janitors, Jared. She decides if this building has a pulse. Jared laughed nervously, looking around for support from his team. You're joking. She was looking at a laptop. She was rewriting your lease. Marcus yelled, losing his composure completely. You just fired the person who was about to save you $2 million in retroactive utility fees. Jared's smile faltered. He looked at the folder on the table. He reached out and flipped it open. There, on the first page, in bold Arial font, it read, Infrastructure Reliance Agreement. Prepared by Tess R. Morrison, Managing Partner, Skyline Infrastructure Holdings, Oh, Jared said. It was a small, weak sound. She walked out. Marcus asked, grabbing the table for support. She say anything? She said, understood. Jared mumbled. Marcus closed his eyes. Oh, God. She accepted the termination of the negotiation. Jared, you didn't fire an employee. You just terminated your own service contract. Down on the street level, I watched my phone. A text came through from Marcus. Please tell me he didn't. I took a sip of my espresso. The bitterness was grounding. I didn't reply. The door had closed. Now I was going to lock it. My office is not on the 37th floor. It is on the 4th floor, tucked behind the mechanical rooms and the freight elevator banks. It doesn't have a view of the city skyline. It has a view of the backup diesel generators and the massive cooling towers that hum with a low, thrumming vibration I find incredibly soothing. This is the brain of the building. The glass suites upstairs are just the decoration. This is the engine room. I unlocked the heavy steel door and stepped inside. It was cool, quiet, and smelled faintly of ozone and expensive paper. I sat down at my desk, a sprawling slab of oak covered in monitors, and woke up my workstation. I didn't feel angry. I really didn't. Anger is inefficient. Anger is messy. What I felt was a profound sense of obligation to the terms of the contract. Jared had been very clear. He didn't want me there. He didn't want my services. As a professional, I was bound to respect his wishes. I pulled the Next Gen Synergies binder from the shelf. It was 3 inches thick. I opened it to Section 14B, Revocable Privileges and Shared Utilities. Most tenants assume that when they rent a floor, they get everything: water, power, internet, air. But Skyline Tower is an old building retrofitted for modern tech. The base lease covers 4 walls and a ceiling. Everything else, the high-speed fiber, the dedicated HVAC loop for the server room, the biometric security access, those are add-on amenities, essentially subleased to the building management to offer to tenants. Jared had just fired the provider of those amenities. I opened the building management software. My access level is root administrator. Step 1. The elevator priority protocol. NextGen Synergies paid a hefty premium for VIP lift access. It meant that when a key card assigned to their floor swiped in the lobby, one of the 6 elevators would immediately prioritize their call, bypassing other floors. It shaved about 4 minutes off the morning commute and allowed them to avoid the commoners. I found the clause, contract status, negotiation terminated by tenant. I clicked the checkbox, revert to standard access. Now, they were just like the call center on the 8th floor. They would wait in line. Step 2, the freight elevator. They had a shipment of new servers arriving on Tuesday. I knew this because I had approved the dock schedule myself. However, access to the heavy-duty freight elevator requires a digital token issued by the infrastructure overseer. I revoked the token. When that truck arrived, they would have to carry those racks up the fire stairs. All 37 flights. Step 3, the climate control. This was the big one. The building's central AC keeps the offices at a comfortable 72 degrees, but a server room generates massive heat. It needs a dedicated chilled water loop to keep the equipment from frying. That loop is my property. I pulled up the HVAC schematic. The flow to Suite 3700 was currently set to high priority/subsidized. I typed in a new command, set to base building standard. The valve actuators on the roof would take about an hour to close. By tomorrow morning, their server room would be a sauna. I wasn't breaking the law. I wasn't sabotaging them. I was simply removing the services they had explicitly stated they no longer wanted from the IT girl. My phone rang. It was the landline. Only 3 people had this number: the building owner, the fire marshal, and the head of legal for the property management firm. It was the legal counsel, Brenda. Tess, Brenda's voice was tight. I just got a frantic call from Marcus. He says the VP's kid fired you. He did, I said, putting the call on speaker while I navigated to the security badge database. Publicly, with witnesses. He terminated our working relationship. Jesus, Brenda sighed. Okay, what are you doing? I'm adhering to the termination, I said, my voice calm. I'm rolling back the uncontracted amenities. I can't provide services without a signed liability waiver. Brenda, you know the insurance rules. If his servers melt and I don't have a contract, I get sued. I know, Brenda said. I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking, how bad is it going to get? I looked at the monitor. I was hovering over the biometric bathroom locks tab. Well, I said, I hope they like using the public restrooms in the lobby. Understood, Brenda said. I'll draft the liability deflection. Have a good evening, Tess. You too, Brenda. I pressed execute. The beauty of infrastructure is its invisibility. When it works, you don't know it exists. You walk through a door, it opens. You breathe air, it's cool. You flush a toilet, it works. You assume these are natural laws of the universe, not services rendered by a contract. On the 37th floor, the laws of physics were changing. It started small. Around 3:30 p.m., the smart glass in the executive conference room, the stuff that frosts over for privacy at the touch of a button, stopped responding. It reverted to its default state, transparent. Jared was in the middle of a private yelling match with his logistics coordinator, and suddenly the entire office could see him pacing and gesticulating like a mime in a glass box. I watched it on the security feed. It was like silent theater. Then came the biometric locks. The interior doors of their suite, separating the developer bullpen from the executive wing, were secured by fingerprint scanners. Those scanners routed through my local server. I disabled the account. The doors didn't lock permanently. That would be a fire hazard. Instead, they failed safe. They popped open and refused to latch. Suddenly, the exclusive executive wing was open to everyone. The junior interns wandered in looking confused. The noise from the sales floor, the ringing phones, the chatter flooded into Jared's sanctuary. But the real panic set in at 4:15 p.m. I have a dashboard that monitors tenant tickets. Usually, these go to building management, but because the infrastructure is mine, I get a CC on anything tagged critical. Asterisk ticket number 942, server room temp alert. Current temp 78 degrees Fahrenheit, rising, asterisk. Asterisk ticket number 943, bathroom access denied. Exec washroom keycards not working, asterisk. Asterisk ticket number 944, internet flickering. Packet loss 40%. Asterisk. Jared had called me IT. He didn't understand what IT actually ran on. The fiber trunk they used was a split line. Without my prioritization code, their massive data packets were now fighting for bandwidth with the dental call center on the 8th floor. The dentists were downloading massive X-ray files. NextGen's video calls started looking like 8-bit Minecraft art. I sat in my office, sipping sparkling water, watching the temperature gauge for sweet 3700 climb. Asterisk 79 degree F. 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Asterisk. My email pinged. It was from Jared. Subject, glitch. Asterisk body, hey, the AC is acting up and the doors are weird. Can you take a look? Need it fixed ASAP. Asterisk. No apology. No, I'm sorry I fired you. Just a demand. He still thought I was the help desk. He still thought he had the power. I didn't reply. I simply archived the email into a folder labeled evidence of unauthorized service requests. 5 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Marcus again. Tess, he's screaming in the lobby, Marcus whispered. He says the building is attacking him. He's trying to get the maintenance guy, old Bill, to hack the thermostat. Bill can't hack the thermostat, I said calmly. It's encrypted with a 256-bit key. It's hardwired into the least logic controller. I know that, Marcus said, but Jared doesn't. He's threatening to sue the building for breach of habitable workspace. Let him, I replied. The lease guarantees a temperature of 74 degrees for standard office space. It does not guarantee cooling for a high-density server farm. That was an addendum. The one he didn't sign. He's asking for you, Marcus said. He's asking where the hell the IT girl went. Tell him I've been terminated, I said. Tell him that as a non-employee, I am not authorized to enter the premises. He's going to call his dad, Marcus warned. I'm counting on it, I said. 82-degree F in the server room. The automated safety protocols kicked in. The servers began to throttle their CPU speed to prevent overheating. The Series B pitch deck they were trying to upload was now moving at the speed of a 1998 dial-up connection. I checked the freight elevator camera. A delivery guy was standing there with 10 boxes of pizza for the team working late. He swiped his card. Red light. He swiped again. Red light. He shrugged, turned around, and left the pizzas with the front desk security. Jared's team was going to be hungry, hot, and stuck in a room with open doors and slow internet. The chain reaction had begun. While Jared was sweating through his fleece vest upstairs, I was straightening my blazer. I had a lunch meeting scheduled for the next day, but I decided to move it up to dinner. I walked across the street to the Capitol Grill. It's the kind of place where the steak is aged for dry weeks and the waiters know your name. I was meeting Robert Vance, the CEO of Omnitech. Omnitech was NextGen's direct competitor. They were a solid, unpretentious company that had been trying to get a foothold in Skyline Tower for 2 years. They were currently crammed into a sublet on the 12th floor, desperate for more bandwidth and better cooling for their own expansion. Jared's father had outbid them for the 37th floor 3 years ago. Robert stood up when I arrived. He was a man in his 50s, silver-haired, impeccably polite. Tess, he said, shaking my hand. I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Is everything all right with the infrastructure renewals? Everything is changing, Robert, I said, sliding into the booth. I placed a thin folder on the table. I ordered a Pinot Noir. Robert waited, his eyes on the folder. I have a unique situation, I began. A block of high-priority infrastructure capacity has just become available. Immediate availability. Redundant fiber loop, dedicated chilled water cooling, and VIP elevator priority. Robert raised an eyebrow. I thought NextGen had that locked down for another 5 years. The renewal was a formality, wasn't it? The renewal was rejected, I said, choosing my words carefully. The tenant representative terminated the negotiation and the service provider. Effective immediately. Robert stared at me. He was a smart man. He didn't ask for the gossip. He looked at the opportunity. How much capacity? Enough to run your new AI division, I said. And since the physical infrastructure is already routed to the riser, I can divert the bandwidth to your floor in, about 10 minutes. And the cost? Standard market rate, I said. Plus a signing bonus for the expedited service. And a 5-year commitment. Robert smiled. It was the smile of a predator who just found a wounded gazelle. Tess, if you can get me that bandwidth by tomorrow morning, I'll sign the 5-year deal tonight. My CTO has been screaming for more fiber. I have the contract right here, I said, tapping the folder. And I can have the bandwidth rerouted by the time we finish our steaks. We spent the next hour reviewing the clauses. Robert didn't snap his fingers. He didn't call me IT girl. He asked intelligent questions about latency guarantees and power load balancing. He treated me like what I was, the landlord of the invisible world. As I signed the countersignature, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the building system. Alert, tenant 3700, NextG, attempting unauthorized access to breaker panel 4. Jared was getting desperate. He was trying to physically reset the breakers, thinking it was a fuse issue. Is everything okay? Robert asked, seeing me check my phone. Just a minor glitch in the old system, I said, putting the phone away. So, Robert, about the freight elevator. I have a slot opening up on Tuesday morning. Do you have any equipment you need to move in? Actually, Robert said, we have a new server rack sitting in a warehouse in Jersey. We've been waiting for a slot. Bring it in, I said. I walked out of the restaurant with a signed contract worth $1.2 million over 5 years. I had just sold Jared's bandwidth to his biggest rival. And the best part? The fiber cables ran physically through the ceiling of the 37th floor to reach the 12th, Jared would be literally sitting under the internet speed he used to have, listening to it hum as it worked for someone else. The next morning, Friday, the legal machinery finally ground into gear. I was in my office at 8 a.m. I like the mornings. The building is waking up. The systems are ramping up. I watched the graphs on my monitors. Asterisk tenant 1200, Omnitech bandwidth usage spiking. Efficiency 98%. Asterisk. Asterisk tenant 3700, Next-G bandwidth usage critical. Packet loss 65%. Temp 84 degree F. Asterisk. At 8:15 a.m., the phone rang. It wasn't the internal line. It was an outside number. Area code 212. New York. Corporate legal. This is Tess, I answered. Miss Morrison, a voice said. This is Alan Sterling, General Counsel for NextGen Synergy's parent corporation. His voice was smooth, expensive, and currently strained. I am looking at a very disturbing report from our satellite office in Texas. They claim the building is experiencing a catastrophic failure of services. Mr. Sterling, I said pleasantly. I am familiar with the situation. However, I would correct your terminology. The building is functioning perfectly. The services to Suite 3700 have simply been aligned with their current contractual status. Contractual status? Sterling paused. I could hear him shuffling papers. I have a lease agreement here that runs through 2028. You have a base lease for the square footage, I corrected. Please refer to Addendum C, subsection 4, regarding technological amenities. It states clearly that high-speed fiber, enhanced cooling, and security integration are month-to-month services provided by the infrastructure overseer, subject to annual renewal. And the on-site representative, Mr. Jared Vance, terminated the provider of those services yesterday. Verbally? Verbally and publicly, I said. He dismissed the renewal negotiation. Silence. Long, heavy silence. He fired you? Sterling asked. His smooth veneer was cracking. He did. He mistook me for a technician, insulted my competence, and ordered me off the premises. As per the harassment clause in my vendor agreement, I complied immediately. Miss Morrison, Sterling's voice dropped an octave. You and I both know Jared is excitable. He's the VP's son. But we cannot have these systems offline. We are bleeding data. We are missing deadlines. What do we need to do to fix this? Well, I said, leaning back in my chair. Usually, I would simply reopen the negotiation. But unfortunately, the capacity that NextGen released has already been acquired. Acquired? By whom? I can't disclose other client details, but the bandwidth has been reallocated. The cooling load has been shifted. You sold our internet? Sterling sounded like he was choking. I sold the available internet, I said. I can't sit on inventory, Alan. You know business. Okay, Sterling said. Okay, look. I'm going to call the VP. I'm going to call Jared. We need a meeting today. Name your time. I'm fully booked today, I lied. I was planning to reorganize my filing cabinet. I can squeeze you in on Monday morning. 9 a.m. Monday? That's 3 days. The servers will melt by Monday. I suggest you tell them to power down non-essential systems, I said. Maybe turn off the lights. Open a window. Oh, wait. The windows don't open. Pity. Tess. Monday, Alan. And tell Jared to bring a pen. A working one. I hung up. Monday was going to be interesting. But first, they had to survive the weekend. A skyscraper is a living organism. If you stop feeding it, it starts to die. And the 37th floor was already gasping for air. By Friday afternoon, the ecosystem of the 37th floor had shifted from a high-tech workspace to a terrarium left in the sun. I wasn't there to witness the degradation firsthand, but I knew the physics of the building better than I knew the lines of my own palm. A glass-curtained skyscraper is essentially a greenhouse. Without the active chilled beams and the forced air circulation, services that were no longer contractually obligated, the solar gain is relentless. I went home, watered my hydrangeas, and opened a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. I imagined the sensory experience upstairs. By 4 p.m., the air would have grown heavy and static. The smell would be the first thing to change, the crisp, Ozone scent of conditioned air replaced by the distinct odors of warm carpet adhesive, overheating electronics, and nervous sweat. I checked the remote logs from my home tablet. The internal temperature of Suite 3700 had stabilized at a sweltering 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Because the circulation fans were set to unoccupied mode to save energy, a default setting for non-contracted spaces, the air wasn't moving. It was just sitting there, baking. I saw the power draw spike on the auxiliary outlets. They had plugged-in fans. Not industrial blowers, but likely whatever cheap, plastic oscillating fans they could panic buy from the nearest hardware store. It was a futile gesture. You cannot cool a server room with a desk fan. You are simply blowing hot air onto hot metal. It was like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet satisfaction for me, and I assume, absolute misery for them. I slept soundly on Saturday. On Sunday, I did my meal prep for the week. Meanwhile, the automated systems of Skyline Tower were executing my commands with cold, unfeeling precision. Sunday at midnight was the witching hour. This was the moment the system goes dark, phase initiated. In high-security buildings like ours, access badges aren't permanent keys. They are digital tokens that require a handshake with the central server every 72 hours to remain valid. It's a security feature designed to instantly lock out terminated employees or lost cards. If the server doesn't send the update packet, the cards expire. I had severed the connection between their local network and my security database. When the clock struck 12 a.m. Monday, every single keycard issued to Next-Gen Synergies turned into a worthless piece of plastic. Monday morning arrived with the bright, optimistic sunshine that usually signals a productive week. I arrived at the lobby at 8:45 a.m., precisely 15 minutes before my scheduled negotiation with the Next-Gen leadership. The scene that greeted me was a masterpiece of administrative violence. The lobby of Skyline Tower is a cavernous space of polished marble and brushed steel, usually a hushed thoroughfare for professionals. Today, it sounded like a riot at a boarding gate. A crowd of about 30 Next-Gen employees was bottled up at the security turnstiles. I slowed my pace, savoring the tableau. A junior developer in a hoodie was slamming his badge against the reader. Asterisk, beep beep. Red light. Asterisk, he tried again, harder, as if percussive maintenance would fix a cryptographic expiration. Asterisk, beep beep. Red light. Asterisk. I'm telling you, it's broken, he shouted at Larry, the head of lobby security. Larry, a man whose patience was as solid as the granite floor, stood with his massive arms crossed, flanked by two other guards. It's not broken, son. System says, credential expired. I can't let you up without a valid badge. Building policy. But we work here, a woman in HR shouted from the back of the crush. We have a meeting. Then I saw Jared. He looked like he had lived the last 72 hours inside a tumble dryer. He was wearing the same clothes he had on Friday, the fleece vest now stained with what looked like coffee and sweat. His hair was matted, his eyes rimmed with red exhaustion. He was frantically typing on his phone, likely trying to call someone, anyone, who could override the physics of the building. He looked up and saw me. I was wearing a cream-colored power suit, immaculately pressed, holding a vanilla latte. I looked like I had just stepped out of a spa. The contrast was sharp enough to cut glass. I walked toward the turnstiles, the crowd parting slightly as they recognized the woman who held the keys to the kingdom. I didn't rush. I approached the far right lane, the one reserved for building management. You! The scream tore through the lobby noise. Jared lunged over the velvet rope, his face a mask of sleepless rage. Back up, sir. Larry barked, stepping smoothly between us, his hand hovering near his belt. She's doing this. Jared shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. Spittle flew from his mouth. She locked us out. She sabotaged the building. The entire lobby went silent. Lawyers from the 20th floor paused. The baristas at the coffee stand stopped grinding beans. I stopped and turned slowly on my heel. I took a calm sip of my latte before lowering the cup. Good morning, Jared. You look unwell. Fix it, he hissed, his voice cracking. Turn the badges back on. Turn the air on. Fix it right now. I'm afraid I can't do that, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the silent audience. Security protocols require a network handshake to validate credentials. You don't have a network, Jared. Therefore, you don't have credentials. I have a meeting, he shouted, looking around wildly as if seeking a jury of his peers. My father is upstairs. We have a meeting at 9 a.m. I checked my watch. Actually, the meeting is with the tenant representatives. Are you the representative? Because from where I'm standing, you look like a trespasser creating a disturbance in a Class A commercial lobby. I am the director of Visionary Ops. Not in this building, you aren't, I said softly. I turned back to the turnstile. I tapped my MasterCard against the reader. The machine gave a cheerful, melodious chirp and the green arrow lit up. The glass barrier slid open smoothly. 4th floor, I said to the elevator call panel. Wait, Jared yelled, trying to push past Larry. You can't just walk away. I believe I just did, I murmured. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of Jared Vance being physically restrained by security while his employees watched in horror. The silence of the elevator car was beautiful. It was the silence of a system working exactly as designed. The 4th floor is the operational heart of the building. It doesn't have the floor-to-ceiling views of the executive suites. It has soundproofed walls, industrial carpeting, and air that is kept at a constant, crisp 68 degrees to protect the server racks. The conference room here is stark. It's an interrogation room disguised as a meeting space. Fluorescent lights, gray table, no art on the walls. Just power outlets and data ports. At 9 a.m. sharp, the door opened. Marcus, the building manager, walked in first. He looked pale, likely from fielding angry phone calls all weekend. He gave me a quick, terrified nod and took a seat at the far end. Then came Alan Sterling, the general counsel. He looked exhausted, his tie slightly askew, carrying a briefcase that seemed too heavy for him. Then came Thomas Vance. The vice president of the holding company was a different breed than his son. He was a short man, compact and dense like a bulldog, with a bald head and eyes like flint. He wore a suit that cost more than my car, but he wore it like armor, not a costume. He didn't look tired, he looked dangerous. Finally, Jared trailed in. Security had evidently allowed him up for the meeting, but he had lost all his bluster. He slumped into a chair, staring at the table, radiating shame. They sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other, alone. My folder was closed in front of me. Miss Morrison, Thomas Vance started. His voice was gravel, low and rough. Let's cut the crap. We are losing $50,000 an hour. My son made a mistake. He thought you were support staff. He was stressed. We apologize. He didn't sound sorry. He sounded like he was paying a toll. He nudged Jared sharply with his elbow. Jared flinched and looked up, his eyes failing to meet mine. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I shouldn't have fired you. Can we just turn the internet back on now? The room hung in suspension. They thought this was a negotiation of pride. They thought I wanted an apology and a raise. I looked at Jared, then shifted my gaze to Thomas. Mr. Vance, I said, keeping my voice level. Your son didn't just mistake me. He publicly humiliated the person responsible for the structural integrity of your business operations. He screamed at me. He ordered me off the premises. We know, Thomas snapped. That's why we're apologizing. Now, put the paper in front of me. I'll sign the renewal. Same terms? No, hell, add 5%. Just get the servers online. I can get over personal insults, Thomas, I continued, ignoring his offer. I'm a professional. The problem here isn't personal. It is strictly procedural. I opened my folder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the gray laminate table. Thomas grabbed it, his eyes scanning the text rapidly. He frowned. What is this? That is the renewal contract for the infrastructure, I said. Good, Thomas said, reaching for a gold fountain pen from his pocket. Let's get this done. No, I said. Look at the stamp on the bottom. Thomas froze. He looked closer. Stamped across the signature line in bold red ink was the word, void. This is the voided contract, I explained calmly. This is the offer that was on the table on Friday afternoon. The offer that your representative rejected and terminated. So print a new one. Alan Sterling, the lawyer, interjected, his voice rising in panic. We're ready to sign. I can't do that, I said. Why the hell not? Thomas demanded, dropping the pen. It clattered loudly on the table. Because the inventory is gone. I leaned forward, clasping my hands. As of Friday evening, the bandwidth allocation previously reserved for next-gen synergies, specifically the high-speed fiber trunk and the dedicated cooling capacity, was released to the open market. It has been purchased. Thomas stared at me. His brain was trying to process the words, but they didn't fit into his worldview where money solved everything. Purchased? By whom? I didn't speak. I just raised an eyebrow. Omnitech. Thomas whispered. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The guys across the street? You sold our fiber to our competitors. I sold my fiber, I corrected. To a paying client with a signed contract. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. The sound was like a gunshot. You can't do that. We have a lease. You have a lease for the drywall and the carpet. I shot back, my voice finally hardening. You have a base lease for square footage. You do not have a lease for the amenities. You rejected that lease. You fired the provider. I cannot sit on unmonetized assets, Thomas. Omnitech signed a 5-year agreement at market rate plus a premium for expedited activation. Undo it, Thomas commanded. He stood up, leaning over the table, his bulldog face flushing purple. Cancel their deal. Give it back to us. We'll pay double. We'll pay triple. I can't, I said. It's a binding legal agreement. The penalties for breach would bankrupt my LLC. Besides, I paused for effect. They're already using it. Their traffic is live. The switch was thrown on Friday night. So, what are you saying? Jared piped up. His voice was small, trembling. We just don't have internet? You have the base building internet, I said. DSL speeds. Shared bandwidth with the lobby Wi-Fi. It's perfectly adequate for checking email, provided you don't have large attachments. But for visionary ops? For a high-frequency trading platform? We can't run the platform on DSL. Jared shouted, tears actually forming in his eyes. It's impossible. Then I suggest you relocate, I said coldly. Because this building can no longer support your needs. Thomas Vance stared at me. He looked at his son, seeing him fully for the first time, not as a prodigy, but as a liability that had just cost him everything. He looked at the lawyer, who was pale and shaking his head. You're evicting us, Thomas whispered. Without serving an eviction notice, without a court order, you're starving us out. I'm just the landlord, Thomas, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. I just provide the walls. What you do inside them is up to you. But if you want cooling, power, and data, you need a friend in infrastructure. And you don't have one anymore. I picked up my folder. I kept my pen. Oh, and Jared, I said, pausing at the door. He looked up, a broken man. The freight elevator is booked tomorrow. Omnitech is moving in their new server racks. You'll have to wait until Wednesday to move your things out. I smiled, a tight, polite expression. I'd suggest using the stairs for the smaller boxes. It's good cardio. The move-out was painful to watch, which is why I watched every second of it on the security monitors in my office. On Wednesday, the next-gen team began the strategic retreat. That's corporate speak for running away in shame. I had flagged the freight elevator for emergency maintenance, a loose bolt on the guide rail that I found very dangerous. It remained out of service for 48 hours. They had to use the service elevator. It's a small, smelly box usually reserved for trash removal. It fits maybe 3 people and a cart. They had to dismantle their server racks piece by piece. I saw Jared carrying a box of cables. He wasn't wearing his fleece vest. He was sweating, struggling with the weight, tripping over the threshold. He looked up at the camera in the elevator corner once. He knew I was watching. I heard through the grapevine, meaning Marcus told me over beers at the pub later that week, that Thomas Vance had reassigned his son. Jared was no longer the director of visionary ops. He was now the director of special projects at a satellite office in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I checked the infrastructure specs for that Tulsa office out of curiosity. It's in a converted warehouse district. The internet there is copper wire, heavily shared. The closest fiber node is 3 miles away. Good luck, Jared. I hope you like buffering. Omnitech moved into the 37th floor 2 months later. NextGen broke their lease, paying a massive penalty that went straight into the building owners' pockets. The owners gave me a very nice bonus for aggressive yield management. Omnitech is a dream tenant. They submit tickets properly. They say please and thank you. They bring donuts to the security guards on Fridays. 6 months later, I was sitting in the 37th floor conference room again. The air was cool, the hum of the servers was a steady, reassuring vibration in the floor. Robert, the Omnitech CEO, was signing off on a request for additional power capacity. You know, Robert said, pausing with his pen over the paper, looking out at the city skyline. I still can't believe they just left. Why would anyone walk away from a setup like this? The redundancy alone is worth millions. I took a sip of my coffee. Poor management, I said. They didn't understand the foundation. They thought the view was what mattered. Well, Robert smiled, signing the document with a flourish. We're happy to be here. By the way, my nephew is starting an internship next week. He's a smart kid, bit of a hotshot. Thinks he knows everything about computers. I froze for a second. My hand tightened on my cup. I told him, Robert continued, his eyes twinkling, that the first person he introduces himself to is Tess. And I told him that if he ever snaps his fingers at you, I'll throw him off the roof myself. I smiled, and this time, it reached my eyes. He'll be fine, Robert. As long as he knows where the power comes from. I walked back down to my office, the bunker behind the elevators. I sat down at my desk, surrounded by the glowing screens that monitored the heartbeat of the tower. Tenant 1200, Omnitech bandwidth usage optimal. Tenant 3700, Omnitech cooling efficiency 98%. Tenant satisfaction 100%. I opened my drawer and pulled out a fresh file folder. I printed a label, Omnitech Infrastructure Agreement. I filed it away, right where the NextGen folder used to be. The building hummed around me. It was breathing. It was alive. And everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. My dignity was intact. My bonus check had cleared. And somewhere in Tulsa, Jared was probably staring at a loading bar, waiting for a PDF to open. We're all healed. Places don't hand out justice memos, but somehow it always finds the right inbox. This story was proof that quiet competence beats loud egos every single time. Thanks for watching.